fun. Appreciate you jumping on the webinar and call. I think currently your microphones or your sound may be muted. There will be opportunity for kind of Q&A as we go through this at 2 points. I want to first, kind of touch base and give everyone an update regarding, the state budget situation and the impacts that it will have on your grants. And then also thought that this was an opportunity to highlight some of the key components of the grant agreement. I recognize that we have a mixed audience. Several of you are experienced grantees and local workforce areas. Others perhaps are first-time grantees, so some of this information may be basic to you as we go through the second part of the presentation. So I do want to recognize that Lorraine Wareham with DCEO, the grant manager for the Talent Pipeline Rapid Response Program, is on the line, as well as expect Pat Campbell and Deb Waldrop also to join, and they are our field managers for the DCEO Office of Employment and Training. Want to also recognize that we threw this webinar together quickly, again, just to get information out as it has become available to us at the department, and particularly the first part of the presentation around the budget is critical, and therefore we're having this meeting today, and then we'll be rerunning this if you have other staff that you want to hear this information on Monday as well. And as Scarlett mentioned, we'll have it archived. So with that, we'll go ahead and get right into the presentation, and I believe that this is available to download from the webinar here, and it can be sent out to you as well. So to get right into it here, just want to give an update regarding where we are at. As you're aware, the state is currently operating without a fiscal year 2016 budget. I want to emphasize, as you should have been notified by Lorraine and other staff that you are able to been suspended. I want to be 100% clear about that. Grants have not been suspended. You're able to continue to operate your grants under the terms and the budgets and the scopes of work that are outlined in your grant agreement. An important piece, however, or impact of the budget impasse is that you will not be able to be reimbursed for those costs until there is a state budget in place. Typically, grantees will report costs for the previous months. We ask that you report costs by the 20th of the next month. So in other words, for your July costs, you would report those by August 20th, and typically we will process a cash request associated with that. I want to point out that any costs for July cannot be paid until there's a state budget, and so obviously that has some significant impacts on your ability, or potentially your ability to operate the program, to make commitments to companies, to work with other training providers. So know that although you are authorized to make commitments, you're authorized to operate the program, know that there is going to be a cash issue here, and there will be delays in reimbursement. Now, once there is a state budget, we do anticipate that you will be able to access any of those costs that you have reported. And to that end, I know that the grant making process, kind of went through, the spring. Grants were issued in June, and that you, and many of you may have some June costs. And I know that some of the grants have reported those costs for June. And those costs for June of 2015 will be paid. And we have the authority to pay those. However, the deadline to post those costs and to pay those costs is August 5th. So this coming Wednesday is kind of, a day to circle to make sure that those costs are reported and that you have a cash request that is in place. And this is that's kind of the key, new piece of information there is that deadline for what is characterized as lapse spending for our previous fiscal year. So with that, I want to take a pause in the presentation, open it up if there are any questions.
Your microphone has been turned on.
Scarlett, if you could unmute the phones, and we'll be checking the pods here if there are any written questions. Okay, I don't see any questions in the pod, so I'll give another minute here, and then we'll continue on with the presentation. Any other questions? Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and move to the next segment of the presentation, where this is kind of outlining some of the highlighted grant requirements. And again, I understand that we have a mixed audience, and that this is fairly basic for many of our experienced grantees, but again, important to highlight some of the key requirements of the grants. And so all of these topics, we're going to go through the slide deck here. And if you have any questions, I'm just going to ask if you can hold those to the end, and we'll, because we may cover some of this information, and we'll come back, and we'll have plenty of time at the end here for a Q&A. And I should mention that I do not anticipate this webinar going the entire 2 hours here. We're going to kind of present this information and then have plenty of Q&A time. So, okay? So again, there is an audit requirement for this grant. You all actually should have received a grant agreement, as well as what we call a welcome package, and that outlines, obviously the grant agreement includes that 35-page document that outlines your scope of work and budget and all of the other state and federal requirements that are included with the grant. As part of that package, there's that welcome document. There's a letter from our director, Jim Schultz, and then it has 2 pages of bullet points that outline what are the reports and other documents that we need to receive to monitor and report on these federal funds. So part of your requirements, and it will be outlined in the welcome package, is the audit.
Your microphone has been turned on.
In section 3.1 of your grant agreement. So these are federal grant funds. And so obviously we follow the uniform guidance around the audit requirements. Fund accounting is another requirement. Grants must submit quarterly financial status reports along with supporting documentation, which is a trial balance from your accounting system that verifies the information regarding the grant. We do ask that your trial balances, we understand that you can have, obviously different accounting systems and different reports, but we must be able to tie your grant revenue and expenses so we can verify what is reported in our grant GRS system, grant reporting system, where you report your costs and other fiscal reporting requirements. Again, this is just pretty standard requirements from federal requirements. Your financial management system has to provide accurate and complete disclosure. These are obviously federal grant funds. And your general ledger must support the costs and revenue reported and allow us to trace the funds. We'll talk about monitoring once we get further into the presentation. Quarterly reports. Grantees must submit the standard grant report form, which I think, Lorraine, we have sent that form to the grantees. Is that right?
Yes, we have.
Okay, great. And so the first quarterly report, when is that due?
Actually due today.
Okay. Well,
and we have quite a few people who've already submitted their reports.
Great, excellent. And so I would just point out that with your quarterly report, it is it combines what is typically like a narrative report or a kind of a progress report, right? Progress to the scope of work, and then also the financial report. And with that report, we ask for a trial balance that, again, matches with the GRS line codes so we can trace that back. SubGrantees, I know that this may be applicable to some of you, that if you do have SubGrantees, you have to obtain written approval. We don't view like a training provider as a subgrantee, but if you have subcontractors, then or subgrantees, then you need to let us know who those are and get pre-approval. And then obviously any of your subs are still bound by all of the terms and conditions of your master agreement between your organization and DCEO. Internal controls, again, basic federal requirements. Grantee is accountable for all grant funds received. You must maintain effective controls in accounting. These are federal grant funds, and you must have controls consistent with generally accepted accounting practices, pretty standard. We look for you to have written policies and procedures, timely bank reconciliations, segregation of duties, proper approvals of payments, disbursements, supporting documentation for cash disbursements. Basically, we're looking for your controls to prevent the potential misuse of grant funds. You should have policies, written policies and procedures that cover the items listed. If you don't, then we can provide some technical assistance and provide you with, with kind of a basic a basic guide or format that you could develop, but the bottom line is that you must have policies and procedures that are adapted to your organization that cover these core items. Expenditure of funds. Grant funds must be expended to perform the tasks that are outlined in your scope of work. If you do have, and again, I think the scope of works, that 2 or 3 pages of your grant agreement is fairly broad, and it should tie back directly with your grant application for the project. If you have any questions or issues about what is included in that scope of work, contact Lorraine or one of your other field staff with Pat and Pat Campbell and Deb Waldrop. Their staff can also assist you with those. Obviously, one of the things that we look at is the kind of the bottom line impact of these grant funds, and so the numbers served and the timeline for those numbers served is something that we're looking to track, and if needed, provide assistance with helping the project move forward. Now, we recognize that part of the first part of this webinar talked about the budget impasse and the kind of the hold on disbursements for the grant. I want to be clear that we recognize that this may impact your ability to proceed with some projects on your original timeline. And so for those projects, we certainly will work with you to amend your project timelines and even we'll certainly consider extensions as requested and as reasonable, regarding adjusted timelines, based on your access to the grant funds and your ability to move forward with the projects. If we do, or if you do need to make a modification of your scope of work or your budget or a date extension, I think many of you have gone through that process, and you can make that request of Lorraine. And typically we request a letter from you that outlines what is the requested modification and what is your rationale for making that request. And then that process, there is a formal review process, and you'll get a formal notification once that has been reviewed and approved by the department. Lorraine, do you want to add anything else as far as modifications go? Any other comments there?
I don't believe so. I think you covered there's going to be a form that needs to be completed that lists, what did you do that didn't work, why didn't it work, and been reviewed, then your modification request will be approved or denied, and then we'll move forward from there.
Right. And again, I think that the key for us is that when we reviewed and approved these grants, we looked at kind of a number of factors: impact on impact on the area that you're serving, number of people that you're going to serve, number of companies. And if there are some significant changes in your project, we should talk about a modification of your project plan and scope of work. And we absolutely want to work with you so that we stick to hopefully stick to our original outcome numbers and budget. But again, we do have some flexibility to work with you, based on the overall benefit to the folks that the companies that you're serving, and ultimately the benefit to the state. Okay. again, some other core principles around expenditures, have to be in accordance with the grant agreement, um, should be, reasonable, made with good sound business practices, conform to all the um, terms of the agreement, should not exceed the amount that is in your budget, um, and consistent with generally accepted accounting principles. As far as allowability, unnecessary costs are not prohibited. Unnecessary costs are prohibited. Obviously, any of the food, gifts, fines, penalty, interest, all of that not allowable. Field trips. That's if you are working with providing work experience. Those types of costs. Um, or other site visits, those types of costs may be allowable if it was in your original project plan. Again, this is some pretty standard federal requirements talking about arm's length bargaining. Ensure that you're not overcharging the government for the services that you're providing. Make sure that you don't enter into an agreement that you have conflicts of interest. I would also point out that your compensation for the services provided must be reasonable. Bonuses must be pursuant to an eligible eligible staff, must meet the guidelines, your own internal written guidelines. Any reserves that you might place in a UI account or others are not allowed, and you must correctly classify contractual employees. Other costs, travel expenses should be in accordance. I don't think that there's a lot of travel costs included in this set of grants. Again, you must retain your source documentation, not only for travel, but for any other expenditures as well. Allocation of costs. Again, I think that you have to have a rational basis for the allocation of costs to this grant. Just the approval of your grant agreement doesn't give you kind of a blank check to just allocate costs. You have to show there has to be a benefit toward the project for any staff that charges the grant, and that's something that obviously we'll review if your grant or when your grant is monitored. I talked a little bit of conflict of interest. Would highlight it again. Would just read. Obviously you're aware of the situations that arise in the media for misuse of grant funds, and we certainly take that very seriously at the department, and we do monitor for conflict of interest, and would point out that a conflict of interest exists if the grantees, offices, director, agents, employees, and family members use their position or give the appearance of using their appearance for private gain, financial or non-financial, for themselves or those that they have family business or other ties. So the bottom line is that if there's a conflict of interest or apparent conflict of interest, we need to know about it, and you need to have safeguards to prohibit conflicts of interest. So again, this is just very important to be transparent around this, and if there are any issues that you need to notify us ASAP. I talked about modifications. We can handle those, scope of work, date extension, budget modifications. Those can all be handled in a similar manner of requesting a grant modification with a letter indicating what you want to do and why you want to do it, and Lorraine will send you kind of a form that kind of outlines that in bullet point. Any program income, you must keep in an interest-bearing account. Any interest must be spent on grant activities or returned to the department at the end of the grant term. Confidential information. I want to point out that there are two key systems that we use to track the activity for these rapid response grants. One is through our Illinois Workforce Development System that tracks the clients or participants or job seekers that are known as WIOA eligible, and WIOA is for the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So it's that's the federal guidelines that fund this program, right? So there's a specific set of requirements for working with dislocated workers, and that's the system that's utilized for those projects. So if you have a project that is providing on-the-job training to individuals, that's the system that you would utilize, right? If you have an incumbent worker project, you use the Illinois IWTS, so that is the Illinois Worker Tracking System. Is that right, Lorraine?
Incumbent worker tracking system.
Oh, thank you. It's too many acronyms. So,
I know.
Both of those systems are required, and you are required to use both of those so we can track our activity and report back to the state and to the federal government about who you're serving and what are those outcomes. And so it's critically important that that information is included and kept up to date. But it's also critically important as you operate your projects that you're aware of and have procedures in place around the safeguarding of confidential information. There's actually a number of state and federal requirements out there, and we've listed one here, which is a federal training employment guidance letter that talks about the handling of personally identifiable information. So the issue is make sure your personal information of your clients are well secured, because we're always just kind of a hack away from being the next headline here. So again, this is something that is an increased area of emphasis, and want to ensure that you are reviewing your policies and procedures and are following them in this regard. Reporting requirements, I just, actually I jumped this slide and going over the whole WIOA eligible clients and IWDS and the incumbent worker tracking system. So I just kind of outlined that. And I know that there was a webinar around the use of the incumbent worker tracking system. And Lorraine, is that right that that webinar was archived?
Yes, it was.
Okay, great. And so I believe at the end of this presentation, there is a slide with some resources with the direct link, and I think that as a follow-up to this webinar, we can also include that link. And so any of you that are operating incumbent worker programs would encourage you to, and if you have not participated in that, I would encourage you to take a look at that webinar and understand that system. there are a number of different screens that you have to go through and report information and upload, client client information, and so we can provide you with some um, technical assistance with that as well as needed. Monitoring and technical assistance, I've mentioned or I've alluded to the fact that your grant will be monitored for compliance in accordance to the terms of the grant agreement and other federal and state regulations. Typically we have a monitor who will come out, usually toward the end of your grant, usually, so in this case it'll be in the spring of next year, and they'll do a straightforward review, overall review of, kind of where your project is at as far as outcomes, and then also look for kind of a procedural compliance and a fiscal compliance to the terms of the agreement. And that is, in many cases, will be on site. We do try to minimize our time that is out, in the field and in your offices, just so you can kind of get to the work of running the project. But we do have to, provide, some on-site review in many cases. We may request documentation be sent over to us as part of a monitoring review. But before we even get to the formal monitoring, and that's a formal process. We'll send you a letter that outlines, this is your grant, it's being formally reviewed, and then if there are any issues, we will document those in a letter that, outlines, what any issues that need to be addressed or corrected. So that's kind of a formal documented process. More of an informal process that happens, that should have already happened and is in the process of happening, is kind of a technical assistance. Technical assistance meaning direct staff assistance, and I know many of those staff are on the phone today. That provide you with, not only do you have a contact with Lorraine as kind of our grant manager, but also we have some field folks who, want to work with you to see where your project is at, ensure that the project is progressing. If you have any concerns around the eligibility or around the regulations or the use of the funds, they are your resource to go to, so that we can help frankly cut some of the red tape here. We understand that there's a lot of requirements, and that that these things can be fairly complicated, and that they're not intended to be a hindrance to operating your project, but they're there as a key resource, and it's our hope that they can help you and help the projects continue to move forward and short-circuit any issues before they become problematic. So some additional resources that we'll leave here as I believe the last slide. This is, you can obviously go back to the Illinois Talent Pipeline Rapid Response website to see some updates and some of the original materials for the application process. We'll have some other links, and WorkNet actually has some pretty cool stuff that I know other projects we're trying to integrate some of the things that we're doing with other projects. For instance, we've got a manufacturing project that is, coming on the tail end, and that's through our advanced accelerated training in manufacturing program, where we've developed a number of materials and guides around doing some work-based training in manufacturing. Another project is working through a job-driven national emergency grant around the information technology sector, And so we've partnered with CompTIA and a number of local workforce areas, and they've developed a lot of cool stuff around assessments and other resources. So this information, as it becomes available, we're trying to post it on Illinois WorkNet and make those kind of cross linkages. And so we'll try to keep those pages updated as we move forward, and would encourage you to take a look at those resources as they are applicable to your projects. Another resource, if you have questions around some of the state's procedural requirements around the quarterly reports or other grant terms, is the Office of Accountability's website there. I think that's also included in your grant welcome package. I alluded to the incumbent worker tracking system and that webinar. I'm not sure if that link is the guide or if it is the webinar, but we'll clarify that in a follow-up email. And then finally, the contact information. And I think I had intended to include Lorraine there as well, but you see Pat Campbell and Deb Waldrop's contact information there as well. So I've talked quite a bit. I appreciate your patience and indulgence with that as we've kind of gone through some of this dry technical material. Scarlett, if you could open the floor or open the mic.
Can I add a...
Sure. Oh, absolutely. And Pat or Deb and Lorraine, if you have anything to add, please go ahead.
I did want to point out one thing about the quarterly reporting requirements that John went over. This is called the DGR, which is DECIO Grantee Reporting. And I just want to make sure that you know that there's actually, you have to have signature authority. The person who signs the document has to have signature authority. And I received the signature authority from that part on the application that requests who has signature authority. So that's where I look to find out who you said can sign your documents. So please make sure that when you submit those, you make sure the right person has authorization. I also wanted to let you know that after a period of time, if we don't receive those reports, the funds will get locked down for that fiend. So, we prefer that not to happen. So please get your reports in on a timely manner when you get your email that requests them. I also wanted to mention that if you have an incumbent worker project, there is a separate quarterly report in IWTS, which is the Incumbent Worker Tracking System, and that's a separate quarterly report from this one. So there's two quarterly reports for the folks who have incumbent worker projects. So that's all I really wanted to cover. Thank you.
Great. And again, just to emphasize that those reporting and those kind of internal controls from the department standpoint have been put in place as a result of audit findings and our requirements from the state to be responsive and follow up on the requirements of the grant agreement and the regulations. So again, I want to emphasize that Lorraine and Pat and Deb are available, and their staff are available to assist you to get through some of the reporting requirements and other red tape as you progress through the grant. We absolutely want to be good partners with you. We appreciate your patience as we get through some of these difficult budget times, and understand certainly that there may be some adjustments that will need to be made to your projects, but we certainly are hopeful that we will have agreement, and that we will be able to move forward with your projects as you're able to support them. So are there any other questions?
Yes, John, can you hear me? This is Julie Courtney. How are you?
Hi, Julie. Good. Thanks, Julie.
Sorry, I jumped on a little late. As far as reporting any costs from May 1st to June 30th, we're still allowed to do that, correct?
That's right. Any activity that occurred in May and June, I would absolutely encourage you to report that cost, and you will be reimbursed for that. And again, I would highlight back to the first slide that the deadline for requesting that cash is August 5th. And so again, that was kind of one of the biggest emphases for this or an impetus for this webinar, and the quick request for the call and webinar is that August 5th deadline to report and draw down those May and June funds.
And then one other question, I see somebody else had the same thing. If I haven't put anything in IWTS yet, because I know we have an incumbent worker project, but I haven't even started anything,
Yeah.
am I going to have to go in and do a quarterly report because I haven't added anything to that system yet?
The first quarterly report isn't due until 9/30/15 for IWTS.
Right, but what I'm saying is I don't even have a project, and our project's been suspended till we have a state budget, so there's not going to be anything going on. So I haven't even put the information into the system yet. That's what I'm saying. So if the information is not in the system yet, I'm not going to have to do a quarterly report, or because it's there, I'll have to do a quarterly report.
Are you planning on not having anything in the system till September 30th? Because that's when
I'm not probably having anything in there until October or January if we don't have a state budget. I'm not putting myself out because I have no way to reimburse these costs.
Right.
So that's what I was asking.
Yeah,
I haven't physically gone into IWTS and actually added the project in yet.
Right. Go ahead.
Well, we got an answer from one of the IT people at IWTS, and they said a quarterly report is required until the grant is complete. So even if you don't have anything to report.
Right. Well, Lorraine, let's table this one because I think we may need to look at if there is a project that isn't, if it's not even included in the system right now, it won't be flagged as a report required. Again, understood that it would be a no activity report, and you're literally checking the box on that report. So let's follow back, Julie, with you on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and Jeannie, I think, just confirmed that fact. So I think that probably answers the question. If you don't put that project in, then it won't be flagged, so it won't be necessary to just send a no activity report there. However, I do want to emphasize the distinction between that IWTS report and the DCEO, that DGR report that Lorraine talked about. That is due, even if you've made a determination that based on your access to cash, that you're going to have to hold back on your activity. And so in other words, no activity has occurred in the past quarter. You still have to submit a report to us. That DCEO quarterly report has to be submitted indicating that no activity occurred. And if you want to indicate that you're pausing until grant funds are available, certainly that would be appropriate. Okay. Any other questions? Let's see. I'm scrolling down. I don't see any others other than the IWTS.
John, did you want to quickly cover the deadline for the August 5th for people who came in late?
Sure, and maybe let me see if I can go all the way back here. And so actually, let me do that. For folks who have come in late, I'll go over this slide again because, again, this was kind of the impetus of the call. But before we do that, I just want to make kind of a second call for any questions. And then if certainly if you don't have any, you're welcome to jump off the call, and appreciate your participation. So any other questions before we go over this slide again? Okay, so for those who may have come in late, one of the reasons for the quick call is just want to emphasize that due to the budget situation, um, we are not able to provide any reimbursements for your grant for costs that are incurred after July 1st of 2015. We would emphasize that your grants have
Your
not been
microphone has been
suspended.
turned on.
You do have the authority to continue to incur costs per the terms of your grant agreement. However, until there is a state budget, we cannot pay you for those costs if they occurred after July 1st. As Julie Courtney mentioned, if there are costs that you incurred in May or June for the project, you certainly can report those, and you can request a cash reimbursement for those. But the deadline to report and request reimbursement is August the 5th, and that's next Wednesday. So again, want to highlight that deadline. If you do have costs that you're going to report, next Wednesday is when you need to have that happen so we can ensure that those funds are issued. Beyond that, we can pay those costs once there is a state budget. But August 5th is when you need to get that in by. So that was the kind of the major point, and wanted to make sure that everyone who has a grant agreement is aware of this. I know that there's been some email traffic, but we thought it was critically important that you understood the potential implications around this, and if that means that you have to make adjustments to your project plan because you have a provider or you have a company that is expecting kind of prompt payment. That's something you may have to adjust. We certainly would hope that training providers or companies would continue to move forward if they're able to wait for payment, but we cannot give a specific date as to when the budget will be resolved and when we would be authorized to approve that reimbursement payment. So again, just want to be 100% clear on the situation that we're in currently. So I think everyone's mic is still open, and or there's the chat pod if there are any questions around that.
There is a new question in the chat pod for you, John.
Okay. You also are not able to pay any cash advances. Correct. So any cash advances you would have to have those, you would have to have that posted. So the grant agreement does include a provision for an advance of projects that are obligated. However, those obligations have to have been in place by June 30th. So
that one is not. The second one will work. But slide docs, it's a big deal.
Okay, was that a question, or I may just be hearing some background noise?
So annoying. No. It's a big conversation after Jeannie and Jerome.
Okay.
I've already heard.
So I think that I'm maybe just hearing some background noise. Are there other questions?
The only thing he's putting over and over again.
Okay, so I think with that we'll probably end the webinar. If you have any specific questions, we'll point out that we're available to answer those. If you want to contact Lorraine or Pat or Deb Waldrop or myself, certainly appreciate your working with us on your grant project. We hope to have additional information as soon as it is available and move forward with these projects. And with that, we'll, I guess, any last call from Lorraine or other staff or any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you all again, and we will be